Hey everybody, this is Dan, and this is the desktop lecture for chapter 14, which is called Cultures of Splendor and Power, 1500 to 1700. So basically, this is a continuing theme from the last chapter. The last chapter, we talked a lot about economics and mercantilism and how this drive for countries to get as much wealth as possible created an expansion as far as colonization goes, and shipping shipping merchandise, making money, exploiting the land, that sort of thing. So as these mercantilist societies grow, or as societies or countries grow in general as far as wealth is concerned, and the wealth is derived from the natural resources that European countries are exploiting, mostly from the New World, but also from Indian Ocean trade. As these countries gain more wealth, their leaders build these grand castles. So there's Versailles in France that the book will talk to you about. There's the Taj Mahal in India, which the book will show you. So there's these really huge monuments dedicated to either religion, if it's a religious state, or to absolute monarchy, such as France and Versailles. And all this really means is, because of all the money coming into these countries, the leaders are trying to impress their citizens and others by building these grand buildings or mosques or whatever. So that's sort of the first part of the chapter, and really this idea of splendor, lavish riches amongst the leaders, is something we see during this phase, and it's really going to come back to bite them later, because the next thing you're going to read about in this chapter that's huge is something called the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is not, people in the Enlightenment during that time didn't know they were in the Enlightenment. It's a construct that historians have labeled this period, but it was a period beginning in the 17th century, that's the 1600s, where arts and sciences and reason and democratic thought started to flourish throughout the world, but especially in Europe, especially in France and in England. But if you read through the entire chapter, you'll see how the Ottoman Empire is changing. So Islam is changing and getting somewhat more progressive. There's a great little picture in there with Islamic scientists. And again, this is a print that was made at the time, so it's a primary source as far as history is concerned. So you're going to read about the Enlightenment. You're going to read about advances in the Ottoman Empire. You're going to read about advances in China. You're going to read a little bit about Japan and India. And it's no coincidence that Enlightenment thought is breaking out all over the world at around the same time. So read about that. It's important that you know what the Enlightenment is. And again, it's this time period where scientific, really not really the scientific revolution, but you could say the beginning of science, as far as Francis Bacon and the idea that real science had to be conducted under controlled circumstances, controlled experimentation, that thing. It's also the time for Adam Smith, who's a great economic philosopher, Voltaire, Diderot, and some others. So read about that. Also note that even though the Enlightenment stressed equality, women really didn't make too many strides there. Females were still seen as sort of a lower class as far as the gender is concerned. So that's the Enlightenment stuff. I'm just looking through on page 537. There's talk about technology and cartography. That's map making in China. You should read that. Other stuff, I'm just kind of looking through the book notes here. Enlightenment we did. So Enlightenment's really the biggie from this chapter. You're also going to read at the end of the chapter about Captain Cook. So he's a British guy who discovers Australia and New Zealand and starts to colonize that. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. And the important thing is, I think for us, especially if you're from the U.S. or you're a U.S. citizen, even though this is world history, these Enlightenment ideas about the economy and about democracy are very influential in the formation of our Constitution and our country. So, we're talking the 1700s, so we're not very far away from the Constitution and independence for the United States. So we're getting close to that area. So keep the Enlightenment in mind, because it's really important as a basis for our culture as well as world cultures. That's it for now. Have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.